Welcome back to another Quick Wisdoms with Tan episode. Today's topic is one that sits really close to home for me because if you spent any time around me, you already know I like things a certain way. I've always owned that part about myself, and honestly, I think of it less as being a control freak and more as being very transparent and saying what needs to be said without dancing around it. For years, I've admired Martha Stewart. Her precision, her calm authority, her ability to take charge and to kick ass with a combination of strength and elegance is something that I've always respected. She's even taught me how to cook and bake. I remember choosing one of her most complicated recipes just to see if I could master it. And there was something really deeply satisfying about getting it right. It wasn't about perfection, it was about the satisfaction of getting it right. And that feeling has stayed with me all these years. So, yes, I like order. I like structure. I like clarity, and not in the cute Pinterest kind of way. I mean, color coding, planning ahead, and having backup plans for my backup plans because I know preparation is what keeps things moving when life gets unpredictable. And the older I get, yes, 55 this year, the less inclined I am to apologizing for any of it. With age comes this kind of clarity. You stop treating your strengths like quirks that you need to kind of soften or to start embracing them for what they really are. And for me, that need for structure, for direction, for intentional control has always helped me lead with confidence. There's this stigma around being the person who steps in, who raised the standard, who wants things done well and done right. But I've reached a point where I don't pretend that intentionality is a flaw. Being deliberate in how you lead, how you communicate, and how you make decisions is one of the most valuable tools that you can have in any industry and in GovCon particularly. And if there was ever a year that proved that this was the one, between the shutdown, the instability, and the constant noise, the people who kept everything on track were the ones who made deliberate choices instead of reactive ones. That's what I want to talk to you about today. What it means to embrace control in an environment where so much is uncontrollable, and why leaning in to that strength isn't about being rigid. It's about positioning yourself to lead with clarity when everyone around you is losing their footing. So let's start with something that most of us don't like admitting out loud. There's this whole universe of things in GovCon that even the most organized, intentional, the Martha Stewart level precision leader cannot control. And trust me, I've tested these limits. I've tried to will order into existence through calendars, beautifully structured spreadsheets, and what I generously offer as strategic nagging. It has never once stopped our clients or the government from doing exactly what they want. There will always be these external forces that operate in their own timeline. The shutdown happens even when your pipeline is solid. The administration changes bring new priorities and new personalities, whether you're ready for them or not. Bid protests and award delays will stall a contract for reasons that have nothing to do with how well you prepared or are performing. And rifts or staffing shortages inside an agency can wipe out months or even years of relationship building overnight. These big shifts reshape how your year unfolds, and we don't have any say or control in them. But something we talk about even less is that there are internal realities that we can't control either, even inside our own companies and our own lives. People leave unexpectedly, and somehow it always seems to happen in the middle of a proposal. Teams get disruptive when life intervenes. Life happens. Leaders change their minds midstream. Partners who were enthusiastic yesterday all of a sudden vanish today. Cultures evolve slower than we would wish that they would. And even in the best systems and processes take time to hold. This is where being a control oriented leader becomes its own challenge. Control feels like safety. It feels like the thing that keeps everything moving in a straight line. And when any of these realities hit, the ones out there and the ones in here, every instinct makes you want to tighten your grip and to fix it all. But this is the part of leadership that requires a different kind of strength, the strength to recognize what is not yours to fix, the clarity to see what is not yours to carry, and the wisdom to know when control is simply not possible. And ironically, it's that recognition, not to attempt to fight the uncontrollable, that creates the real power. Because once you get honest with what you cannot control, you finally see where you have the greatest influence. And that is where the real work begins. Now that I've put everything out on the table about what we cannot control, like the shutdowns, the shifts, the rifts, the changing of policies, the dissolving of contracts, the real question becomes the one that actually shapes how we lead. What can we control? This is the part that I love because this is where the competitive edge lives. The companies that stay strong in GovCon aren't magically avoiding chaos. They're just simply led by people who stay steady and intentional through it all. Leaders who know where to put their energies, where their influence matters, and how to create stability even when nothing around them is stable. And the truth is, we have far more control than we sometimes give ourselves credit for. A lot of that starts with how we run our organizations. No matter what is happening in Washington or inside your agency or customer, we always have influence how our teams operate and how we show up. We shape the expectations, the standards, the rhythm of our work. We decide whether our internal processes collapse the minute someone takes PTO or whether they hold up because we built them with care. There's a comfort in knowing that no matter what the noise outside of the world throws us, we can create a place where the work and our lives still moves, the team still communicates, and the mission stays intact. That steadiness doesn't come from circumstance, it comes from within us. The same goes with our pipelines. We can't force contract awards to move faster or to bend timelines to fit our convenience. Wouldn't that be great if we could? But we can be honest about whether our pipeline reflects reality or wishful thinking. And sometimes that honesty is really uncomfortable because it means letting go of opportunities that we've grown emotionally and personally attached to. But the clarity that comes with a disciplined, truthful pipeline is worth it. It keeps you focused on what you can shape and spares you from pouring countless numbers of hours and energy into something that was never going to land. In a year like this, truth has real strategic value. Our understanding of our customers and the market is another place where we have full control. We may not be in charge of changing priorities or the shifting missions, but we can choose how deeply we understand them. Even in quiet periods, there's always something to learn about their pain points, their funding patterns, their leadership, their pressures, and even how our competitors can position themselves. That knowledge doesn't just keep you informed, it keeps you mission ready. It keeps you from falling behind. And then there's the culture of our team. We can't stop people from getting sick or needing time off or making life decisions that affect our companies and our work, but we absolutely can control how we respond during these ups and downs. We decide whether the atmosphere is clear or confusing, if it's steady or if it's frantic. We can influence how people respond when things get chaotic, whether they spiral or whether they regroup. Team culture isn't something that just happens overnight. It's shaped and worked on every day by how we show up. Partnerships are the same way. Partners will always surprise you. Sometimes the best, sometimes not in the best ways, and sometimes in the worst. But the way you choose them, the way you set expectations, the way you maintain your relationships long before the proposal hits, that's on you. Strong partnerships don't appear just out of the air. They're the result of intentional choices and ongoing communication. And when done well, they give you leverage instead of stress. But at the center of everything we control is something much simpler and much more powerful: our intention. We are the ones who choose whether we react or respond, whether we prepare or procrastinate, whether we let the noise dictate our decisions, or whether we stay aligned with our vision. Intentionality is quiet, but it's strong, and it often turns chaos into clarity. That clarity, in turn, turns into momentum, and momentum into results. That is what we control every day, no matter what is happening around us. When people hear the word control, they often associate it with perfection. But control, from my perspective, has never been about making everything flawless. If perfection was a goal, I would not be working in GovCon. It would be the last industry that anyone would choose. Things shift constantly, directions change overnight, and the pace alone keeps even the most seasoned leaders and experts on their toes. Control matters in this field because it gives you something far more valuable than perfection. It gives you preparedness, discipline, and focus. These qualities don't erase chaos. They give you the steadiness to kind of navigate through it. Preparedness is the part no one sees. It's that quiet, often overlooked, because it happens long before anything dramatic unfolds. It shows itself when shutdowns hit or when a customer suddenly goes dark. Teams that are prepared don't freeze, they don't scramble. They have the sense of a direction because they've taken the time to understand their customer and the landscape they're operating in. They've built this rhythm that holds up even when the environment doesn't. So, preparedness creates this kind of internal calm that lets you think clearly at times when others really can't. Now, discipline is what carries you through the everyday moments that don't feel urgent, but matter more than people realize. It's what keeps you from drifting. It's what ensures your team stays coordinated during these slower stretches so that they're ready for the fast ones. And yes, it often feels like the work part of the work, the consistency, the documentation, the follow through. But it's that very consistency that makes your performance repeatable instead of accidental. Discipline gives your team something dependable to stand on when everything around you feels very unpredictable. And then there's focus, which is one of the hardest skills to maintain in a field full of noise. There is always something pulling your attention: another opportunity, another request, another fire to put out. Focus is what helps you filter all of that. It's what helps you realign with the larger goals instead of chasing every possibility simply because it exists. Focus gives you that clarity to move with intention, not impulses, which makes every choice stronger. When these three elements kind of come together, the preparedness, discipline, and focus, control becomes something very different than this stereotype that people imagine. It stops being about micromanaging and starts being about creating an environment where your team can operate with confidence and where your decisions have a space to be strategic instead of reactive. GovCon will always be full of shifting timelines, changing requirements, and those unexpected interruptions and disruptions. That's not going to go away. But leaders who lean into preparedness, discipline, and focus create a kind of intentional consistency that allows them to stay steady despite the fluctuations and chaos around them. And that steadiness is often what keeps you competitive when others are losing their mind. One of the biggest misconceptions about leaders like me is that we want to control everything all the time. People assume that control oriented leaders cling to structure because we're afraid of what might happen if we loosen our grip. But the longer I've been in this industry, the more I've realized that control isn't about fear at all. It's about creating this foundation steady enough that you can take risk without losing your footing. That clarity didn't come early in my career. I had to grow into it through years of trying, adjusting, overcorrecting, learning when to let something go and when to step in, and failing time and time again. When you're younger in your career, you hold tight because you want everything to be right. As you gain experience, you start to kind of recognize these moments where holding on helps the moments where holding on actually holds things back. There are times when I can feel that stepping back is the better move, letting my team experiment with their own ideas, even when I might have done things differently. It usually leads to growth for them and a new insight for me. You learn to trust people more than just the easy during the hard times than just the easy times. You learn that giving someone the room to try is often more valuable than giving them direction. And then there are situations where stepping in is the right thing to do, but not to micromanage, but to protect your strategy. Over time, you develop an instinct for the drift. You can sense when a path is veering off course and when you step forward to realign without taking ownership away from people who do the work. It becomes less about control and more about coaching and leading. What experience also teaches you is that boundaries and innovation aren't opposites, they depend on each other. And when your foundation is strong, when your expectations, communications, and processes are steady, you actually have more freedom to push into new territory. You can experiment, challenge outdated thinking, and introduce approaches because you have a stable foundation. You're not operating from chaos, but you're operating from a state of confidence. And then there's a part that comes with age, the willingness to take those meaningful risks, not wild impulses, impulsive leaps, but intentional ones. The risks that open doors, that strengthens your team, it sharpens your work, or maybe moves your business forward. The older I get, the more I understand that risk isn't the opposite of control. Risk is what control gives you the permission to do. So there's the balance, not gripping everything so tightly and not everything letting everything float loose, but to understand how to use control as a tool, one that gives you the stability to stretch, the confidence to innovate, and the courage to push through into the spaces where the real growth happens. So, if there's anything over the past year has reinforced, it's that control isn't about micromanaging or perfection. It's about clarity. And it's about owning the parts of the business that just genuinely move the needle and letting the rest kind of roll off your shoulders without draining all of your energy. So here are some strategic takeaways. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned this year is that stability rarely comes from what's happening around us. It comes from what we build inside our companies and inside ourselves. We can't stop shutdowns, leadership changes, or award delays, or even internal disruptions from happening. But we can shape the system, the expectations, the rhythms that keep us steady when everything else is shifting. Stability is something that you engineer over time. It shows up in our conversations, in our decision making, and the way you set standards, the consistencies that you model for your team. You don't need to control everything to create stability. You just need to control the parts that keep people grounded. Preparedness, I think, is one of the most underrated competitive advantage. Preparedness isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It's often invisible until you need it. What I've learned is that the most prepared companies are the ones that move with confidence when everything around them is hesitating. They make decisions faster because they aren't scrambling for information. They respond to change without spinning, and they can stay centered even when the world gets chaotic. Preparedness isn't about predicting the future, it's about building that readiness, that you're never caught flat footing. It's that quiet strength, and it pays off every single time. Discipline makes success repeatable. There's nothing accidental about consistent success in GovCon. The companies that win regularly aren't relying on luck. It might seem like it, but it's not. They rely on discipline. Discipline shows up in the way that you plan, the way you prepare, and the way you execute. It turns chaos into something manageable. It reduces rework and keeps people aligned even when stress levels rise. It's why at Entellect, our company mantra has always been plan, prepare, and expect to win. When people understand the standard and see it modeled consistently, they start operating with that same level of clarity. Discipline isn't rigidity, it's reliability. And that reliability is what allows you to win again and again and again. Focus is what determines our direction. One of the most powerful skills a leader can develop is the ability to say no, not out of negativity, but out of clarity. Focus is what protects you from distractions that look like opportunities. It's what keeps our teams aligned on what actually moves the mission forward instead of scattering your energy across anything shiny or new. When you focus with intention, you start spending your time on all the right things, not all the things. And in industry, that kind of clarity is priceless. The controlled risk is leadership in motion. Strong leaders don't avoid risk, they manage it with intention. Control gives you that foundation to take those risks without putting the business or your team in jeopardy. And when the systems are solid and your team is aligned, you can stretch even further. You can experiment. You can challenge the status quo with confidence. Controlled risk is that space where innovation lives and often where breakthroughs can happen. Leadership isn't about eliminating those risks, it's about taking the right ones at the right time. And intentionality is at the heart of all of it. If there's ever a single trait that elevates leadership, it's intentionality. It's that quiet guide behind every meaningful decision. Being intentional means you choose your actions with clarity, not emotion. You can communicate with purpose. You stay steady when pressure builds, and you look for opportunities where others only see problems. Intentionality turns strength into strategy. It can turn challenges into momentum, and it turns everyday choices you make into a long term impact. I want to thank you for spending a few moments with me here today. And if this episode gave you something to think about or something that you can put into practice, make sure that you follow our podcast and share it with a friend and leave a rating or a comment. It helps more GovCon pros find the conversation and join the community. And remember, you have to think big to win big. Be an intellectual. And until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of possibilities.